People who have snapped on a bully at school. What's your story? 5th grade, this dude who always picked on me was kicking my seat in a assembly, and I was having a terrible week and this was my last straw. I punched him in the face, but I wasn't satisfied with the first punch because it felt weak, so I figured I'm already going to be in trouble, so I went back for a second better punch that felt worth getting in trouble over. Also, this was a dare assembly, which was about saying no to drugs and violence, so I basically learned nothing. I was being bullied for like a month when I was 13 or 14. Some guy from my class started messing with me, pushing, hair grabbing, neck slapping, stuff like that, and I didn't know how to handle it. One of his friends from another class, a guy I had never spoken to before, tried it once, and I instinctively punched him in the face. Bullying stopped. If that random guy didn't do what he did, I don't know how I would have put an end to it, to be honest. I smashed a kid across the face with a stapler because he hit me all the time, and I got tired of it. I was in 7th grade. Didn't get caught. My second in France, like 15 years old, bully decided to sit next to me in class, repeatedly whispered insults to me, and at one point I snapped, took his head, and bashed it into the desk. I think I would have been in deep shit had his textbook not been there. Needless to say, I got kicked out of that class and had to change English group. Couple of bullies like to do monkey in the middle with me. Didn't take me long to figure out the solution was to simple tackle one of the bullies and start punching. In 4th grade, this kid named Nick used to punch me every day at recess. I went home one day crying about it, and my dad told me to punch him back. So the next day when Nick came around to punch me, I whipped around and just beat the snot out of him. Absolutely wailed on him. One of the teachers noticed and took us to the principal's office, and we got off with warnings. After that, Nick never punched me again, but would make sure I could get to the front of the line for the drinking fountain, and picked me first for any sports game he was team captain for. 6th grade. A few days before end of school year. Beat his ass, and didn't stop even with teachers saying so. The bully stopped, but I was sick and tired of his shit. Lucky me, I didn't have to come in for those remaining 3 days. Best of all was that my parents were on my side. For context, I'm 6 feet 5 inches and have been since high school. There was a girl I was friends with who had a boyfriend. There was nothing going on between us, but her boyfriend was older and used to call me names and throw shit at me in the halls. I'm not a particularly confrontational person, so I'll let it go on like that for a while. There was a day when he knocked my books out of my hand, and I had had enough. He wasn't nearly as big as I was, so I picked him up by his shirt and slammed him against a locker. The bullying stopped. Edit, a word. I was 11, he was 9. But he beat up my 6-year-old sister on the bus home one day and none of the adults would do anything about it. So after we got off the bus, I kicked his ass. He never bothered my sister or any other kid ever again. I was 7, and I was a nice kid with average grades, and this one bully that was taller than me. He used to be any typical bully, like trip you on your lunch and push your head for no apparent reason. I was getting annoyed that I felt the red heat go all over my body. I looked at him and told him to stop. I looked at him. He pushes me to the ground. I stopped and kicked his tables and punched his nose with all my force. His nose started to bleed and I was sent to the office. My mom had this thing where if they started it, then she'll pretend that she's mad at me at school and come home saying congrats. Edit. Thanks for the stranger who gave me the silver medal, have a nice day. A group of boys thought it was hilarious to keep our football and stop us from getting it back after it rolled towards them on the school field. They kept passing it between themselves and picking it up and trying to keep it away from us. After trying for about a minute to get the ball from them by running after it, one of them picked the ball up and kept moving it away, trying to keep it out of my reach. I took a few steps back, no longer interested in trying to not hurt them, and did a goal kick on the ball. I kicked his hand in the process and the ball smacked him in the face and gave him a bloody nose. He didn't even try to react, he just turned and walked away with his tail between his legs. The bully would always grab my ass or slap my neck say rude things about my nationality and insult me. I often told him to stop that, but he never did. For a year and a half. Once, in a lecture, he came to my desk and grabbed my ass. I had a really bad day that day too. The moment he grabbed my ass, I saw red. I was mad. I stood up and looked him in the eye. I took his head and smashed it against the wall with all I had. Nothing serious happened to him, except for the teacher being mad at him for bothering me. I was a quiet and good-hearted kid, and the teacher knew that. Edit, I'm a guy. And that asshole wasn't even gay. Or maybe he was, but never admitted it. Not at school, but I was 12 and a kid on my block constantly challenged me to fight him, because he knew I didn't want to. So it was a great way for this chubby, incompetent brat to show off. One day, outside the convenience store, to his surprise I accepted. He came towards me, and I basically just lifted up my leg and kicked him in the stomach. Honestly, he just bounced off my foot. In shock, he came at me again. This repeated about 3 times as the expression of disbelief on his face became more pathetically pronounced. He finally gave up and ran home past my house, telling my mother, who happened to be outside, that I beat him up. But she already knew about his behavior towards me, so as soon as I explained what happened, it was all good. He wasn't actually hurt physically, just emotionally. We both learned a good lesson that day, and he actually grew up to be a decent guy from what I could tell. In middle school we were hanging around before classes started, and this guy who used to be my friend came up behind me and put a condom in my mouth. I turned around, pushed him up against the wall, and punched him in the face. The whole school heard about it, and they were all backing me up for the rest of the day. I didn't even get in trouble. Edit, because I'm getting some upvotes, I'll expand a bit. He was super embarrassed and tried to negotiate with me, saying you have to let me punch you back to make up for it, or save his honor or some shit. People would not stop teasing him about it. I think that when the teachers heard about it, they thought it was funny, and I had a good rep with them, so they let it slide. I had been bullied all year long by this guy, and it was the last week of 8th or 9th grade. Comes up to me and says something about my clothes or something, and I just saw red. I turned around and hit him with a palm strike to the face. The bottom of my hand connected right under his nose. He doubled over and I bolted. I heard later his lip got stuck in his braces, and he had to go to the doctor to fix it. I got a stern talking to about not hitting people, although my teachers were aware of the verbal bullying. 5th grade. Can't remember what specifically caused me to snap, but after spending the last 5 years being continually harassed, bullied, and assaulted by a specific boy, I'd had enough. I calmly walked to the mounted pencil sharpener at the back of the class and sharpened my pencil to a very fine tip. Then, I walked behind said bully and in a downward motion, slashed him across the entirety of his back in one fluid motion. Obviously, I got a truckload of shit for what I did. Principal insinuated to my mother that the parents of the other boy may want to press charges for my harming of their pride and joy. My mother, bless her heart, retorted back, if that's the case, perhaps I should press charges considering how often my son has been coming home with cuts, bruises and welts administered at their boys' hands without repercussions from your staff. The principal moonwalked out of that conversation, so ducking fast. I still was read the riot act at home, though. Got drilled into me that what I did was use a weapon to harm someone, and that it would never be tolerated at any level. Grounded for a very long time. Bully gave me space, for a while anyway. Went back to his usual torment after a couple weeks, minus any physical contact. High school. One girl made my life hell. I didn't even know her, or fully understand why she targeted me. She tried to run me over, and told cops I walked in front of her car. One day walking up the stairs, she proceeded to taunt me, hitting me in the back with objects, and calling me names. I stopped, turned around and punched her in the nose. She landed on her back on the landing. I just stood over her, and said, "What now, bitch?" She never said one word to me after that. I didn't snap a bully, but I did snap at a teacher who didn't do anything, no matter how many times I told her I was being bullied. All my bullies, their parents were on the parent council. They got funding for field trips and things like that, so the kids were basically untouchable. I yelled at the teacher telling her what they have done to me. Things like taking my school supplies, excluding me from activities, calling me names, and throwing things at me, along with other things. I told him how I was sick and tired of being blamed, that it was my fault I had no friends, when every single bully told people to avoid me. They invented this thing called the Katie touch. Like the cheese touch, but you could get the Katie touch if you talk to me. And I finished it by telling her that she was stupid and was too worried about losing school funding, that she didn't care what happened to her students. No one backed me up and nothing changed. I got a 3-day in school suspension and the bullying got worse. Kids would take my lunch and shoes, so I'd get in trouble for not wearing my indoor shoes, and I passed out one time from hunger and dehydration from not eating. I hated that school and am so glad I went to a junior high that didn't have anyone else there from my old elementary. To all teachers, just because a kid is always playing by themselves, it doesn't mean they like it that way. Also, if a kid tells you they are being bullied, then do something about it. This happened in 8th grade. I was bullied from the beginning of 7th grade, and one day, I decided to report him. I got bullied for reporting the bully. I got so mad that one day after church I beat him up in the parking lot. I made sure I didn't beat him up enough to have to call an ambulance, but enough to hurt. He didn't mess with me from then onwards. I was severely bullied from my earliest memory all the way through high school. The times I remember snapping were these. 3rd grade, we were putting the chairs upside down onto the desks at the end of the day, and this kid kept pushing my chair and pushing me. I turned around and shoved him as hard as I could with both hands, and he fell onto the desk behind him. The chair fell off. He fell off onto the chair, and I got in trouble. 4th grade, at some Boy Scout thing, and there were sodas. I got one out of the cooler and a kid who bullied me a lot grabbed it out of my hand and walked away. I grabbed another one and threw it at the back of his head. Got in trouble, of course. 7th or 8th grade, after being bullied incessantly, I lost it and was crying and screaming and punching the lockers, and got in trouble for denting a couple of them. 9th or 10th grade, while on the bus, one of the bullies grabbed my comb out of my back pocket. He'd messed with me a lot. Rather than punching, for some reason I used my open hand to slap him really hard on top of his head. He was seated, and I was standing in the aisle. He complained of his neck hurting from it, and I got in trouble. Between each of these instances, I'd put up with constant bullying every day and do nothing, and no teachers gave a shit. Bullies got away with bullying all the time, but even if I simply said leave me alone with a loud voice, I was in trouble. It never made sense to me. Edit. I appreciate the empathy I've received from this post and want to clarify, I'm not the attention-seeking, intentional victim type, just answering Op's question and relaying my experiences. While I still have a ton of self-doubt, I'm doing pretty decently now. Took a duck ton of time and effort, though, lol. Beat mine with a hockey stick one day after school. We were playing road hockey, he lived down the street. He just kept going, and to be honest I saw red. I just remember my dad pulling me off while I was slamming my wooden goalie stick into his side while he tried to cover his bleeding face. His parents never perused anything. My parents took me to counseling. He ended up nearly killing his best friend in a drinking and driving accident. Friend was never the same. Permanently injured. Bully killed himself a few years later after he didn't make a junior hockey team. I still feel bad. I have never been in any violent interaction before or since. Now as an adult and an educator I know he was likely really hurting. I'm sorry, Justin. Edit. Thank you to everyone for the messages and for opening up with your own stories. The only way we improve as a greater community is to role model how to be human. And that includes mistakes, regrets, and sorrow as much as it includes success, celebrations, and happiness. Keep sharing it all. We all learn from our shared stories. To those who sent me direct messages about their struggles, I promise you I will respond to every one of them by tomorrow. To anyone else reading this, I always respond to personal messages. So feel free, if you want someone to chat with. If you're struggling with any thoughts of serious self-harm, please call your local suicide helpline. I've used them before. It does help, even if it's just a little. Keep taking care of each other everyone. It takes little effort to be kind.